Hello and welcome back to Autistic After Hours. I'm your host Ashra, and today we're going to be talking about reasons why autistic people may be more vulnerable to developing and experiencing trauma than non-autistic or allistic people. While I did use research to create this episode, I also want to mention that a lot of the theories that I'm going to talk about today are theories that I have come up with based on anecdotal experiences, and I've used research to substantiate those theories that I've come up with. I've used my own anecdotal experiences through actually being autistic, being very immersed in the autistic community through my content creation and through the support groups that I run. With that being said, because this is based on anecdotal experience and some light research, some of it may not be true. It's based on my own theories. And so it's really important to do your own research, to keep in mind that none of what I'm talking about is a fact. It's all based on my own experiences and substantiated by some research that I found. Quick reminder to follow Autistic After Hours on Instagram. That's where I post original content every week and polls every single Monday so that you can vote for episode topics. Also, quick thank you to the people that are watching me here on YouTube. If you didn't know, Autistic After Hours episodes are all watchable on YouTube. Now, the first theory that I have has to do with differences in sensory processing. I think there's a lot of research looking into nervous system dysregulation and differences in autistic people. I even have an episode all about that, so if you want to go back and listen to that, you can. But because autistic people process their sensory environment differently than allistic people, we can often be predisposed to being in a state of hyperarousal more than other people. Because of this, it can make it so our nervous systems are feeling dysregulated and we are dysregulated much more frequently and to a higher degree than allistics. I think this is both a cause and a result of developing traumas more than allistic people. I think that being in a very constant state of hyperarousal can make you more susceptible to being thrown off by things, to having stronger responses to things. And at the same time, I also think that being autistic does lead to being dysregulated more. And so it's kind of this multi-directional relationship where being autistic can lead to more dysregulation, but that dysregulation can then lead to more stress, more hyperarousal, more trauma. Some examples of this are if an allistic person is exposed to a negative sensory experience, they may be impacted by that, but they may be able to move on after a little while. With an autistic person, they may be exposed to the same negative sensory experience and they may have a very negative reaction to it, and that negativity, that reaction may last longer and be harder for the person to work through, may be harder for them to overcome, and they may have a fear ingrained in them from that experience that an allistic person maybe would have been able to get over much more easily and quickly. And again, I think this is because a lot of times autistic people are in a more constant state of hyperarousal, making us more susceptible to being heavily impacted by stressors in our environment. I also think that the way autistic brains process sensory information can lead to that information feeling much more impacting. So an autistic person, just because they're autistic, may, for example, be more susceptible to being impacted by loud sounds, and they may also be in a state of hyperarousal, making that impact even more strong. The next theory I have has to do with social rejection. And as autistic people, we are often exposed and subject to a lot of bullying, exclusion, just feeling like we don't belong, and people just outright disliking us, misunderstanding us, not wanting to be around us because of the things that make us different, because of our autistic traits. And because of this ongoing experience of social rejection, it can make us feel like we are in an ongoing state of just experiencing social traumas all the time. And it can be this cumulative effect as well, where maybe in the beginning of your life, where you were exposed to rejection or embarrassment or bullying, maybe it was impacting, but maybe it wasn't traumatic necessarily yet. But after this accumulation of having so many negative experiences, it can stack on top of each other, and that can make it even more impacting, even more trauma-inducing. Another reason why autistic people may be subject to and may be more susceptible to trauma is because, kind of as an underlying feature, many autistic people are experiencing a constant and chronic state of social traumas because of the ongoing bullying, the ongoing feeling of being misunderstood, and feeling of not belonging that we experience. So although autistic people may definitely experience social exclusion, rejection, and social traumas, what makes it different is the frequency and intensity, where autistic people are often exposed to these social negativities and social traumas way more and with a higher intensity than non-autistics. And of course, this is not always the case. Not every autistic person experiences this, and many autistic people do experience this. But as a general blanket statement, meaning that there are definitely exceptions to it, many autistic people do experience ongoing, chronic, high-intensity stressors from social situations, and this can lead to trauma. As an autistic person, one of my biggest struggles with physical intimacy is my sensory issues. I spent so much time and have had so many negative experiences because instead of honoring my sensory needs, I was taught to ignore them and dissociate. However, I recently have been using a platform called Beducated to help me navigate this area of my life in a way that feels affirming for me. Beducated is a website with over 100 online courses for all things sex and intimacy. They even have a course on sex and disability. It makes me so happy to see a platform like Beducated taking action to include disabled people in their content creation. And if you haven't already, I highly recommend checking Beducated out. And if you do want to sign up, be sure to use my code Ashra to get 50% off the yearly pass. There is also a 14-day risk-free money-back guarantee just in case it isn't for you. The link is in the show notes. Another theory is having to do with masking, suppressing your natural and innate behaviors, tendencies, in order to fit in or to avoid harm or rejection. It is often a survival strategy, especially for multiply marginalized autistic people. For example, for Black and brown autistic individuals, it is most definitely, in many situations, a survival mechanism. But with this theory, trauma comes in because many autistic people engage in high levels of masking, and this constant state of self-suppression can make you feel like you're constantly in an unsafe situation. It can make you feel like you are never safe to be yourself. You are never safe to let that mask down, to let your autistic traits out, and to just be you. And because of this, it can elevate your stress hormones, leading to this trauma reaction in your body, feeling like you are not safe to be who you are. Because of that, stress hormones are elevated, and because of that, your body is constantly in this nervous system dysregulation, trauma response state, even if there is not actually any immediate threat in your environment. And the thing here is that autistic people may also engage in sort of masking-like behaviors where they're adjusting their behavior to fit different contexts. That is something that many people do, regardless of your neurotype. But autistic people are not often doing it as a survival mechanism, whereas autistic people are. And this is the difference where trauma comes into play, where stress hormones and chronic stress and nervous system dysregulation are coming into play. Not to mention the fact that it is often more difficult for autistic people to adjust their behavior to suit various contexts, as is mentioned in the DSM-5. With that being said, masking is that very thing. And so it's not only difficult to constantly suppress your innate tendencies and behaviors, but it is even harder to do that as an autistic person, which leads to even more strain, more stress, more dysregulation, more of your body chronically feeling like it's in a state of stress and trauma. Those are all of the main theories that I have. Ultimately, I think it's a combination of being autistic, which can lead to differences in the ways that we respond to trauma and the ways that our body processes trauma. But more than that, I think being autistic in this society is a highly traumatizing experience for many of us. And again, I think this is exacerbated for multiply marginalized people who often are having their lives put at risk or even taken away from them because of being autistic. If you're wanting to hear more specifically about the nervous system dysregulation and chronic stress that I mentioned when it comes to being autistic, then I would recommend going back and listening to that episode because I think it's very connected to a lot of what I talked about today. I think that it's often really misunderstood and brushed to the side as just being sensitive, when actually there's differences inside of our bodies that are contributing to the ways that we process and experience trauma and stress. I know for myself, I've had many situations in the past that I would categorize as traumatic, and if I voiced that to somebody who's not autistic, they probably wouldn't get it. Things like constantly being exposed to loud sounds outside in my environment, hearing ambulances, hearing loud sirens, hearing loud beeping horns, hearing motorcycles, just all of these things that are constantly a part of our external environment, being exposed to them all of the time, it is very stressful. And I think this accumulation is traumatic. I think it does lead to a trauma-based fear of those things. I do feel like it's very hard to leave the house and very scary, and I often don't because of that trauma-based fear that I have. And again, this is with sensory things, it's with social things, and again, I think it's a very multi-directional relationship where being autistic innately can change the way that you experience trauma, can change your baseline of hyperarousal and stress and the way that you respond to that. But I also think it's a intermingling of how being autistic in certain societies can lead to chronic stressors in your environment, can lead to cumulative stress, which ends up being traumatic for you. I wanted to make this episode because I want you to know that you're not alone and you are very valid. You're not just sensitive, and what you experience very well can be trauma, and it is okay to call it that. A lot of times people are dismissive because they feel like it's not a big deal for them, then it shouldn't be a big deal for you. But again, a lot of times the things that autistic people experience may be easy to move on from for them because their body is not in a constant state of hyperarousal, they're not having to mask as a survival mechanism, and they're not autistic. But for an autistic person, the way you take in information, the fact that you maybe are in a constant state of hyperarousal and maybe you are engaging in a lot of masking as a survival mechanism, all of that contributes to being more predisposed and being more impacted by things that can lead to trauma. So you're not alone, you're not wrong, and if you feel a certain way, then that's valid. You are allowed to feel strongly. You are allowed to feel traumatized by things that maybe other people see as no big deal, because to you, maybe they are, and you're allowed to feel that. As always, I'll end this episode the same way I end all others by saying we need more research, we need more neurodiversity affirming resources and support for autistic adults, because right now there really is not much of anything. And because we are often more predisposed and experiencing more trauma, this is another reason why so many therapies that are adapted for autistic people often do not work and even can be traumatizing in and of themselves. I've had people leave me comments saying that their therapist tried CBT with them and it felt like they were being gaslit and it made them feel traumatized. Some people are so traumatized from therapy that they don't even want to go to therapy anymore because the way that the therapist adapted the treatment was completely non-beneficial, even harmful for them as an autistic person because of the differences that we experience. So you're not alone. We need better research. We need better care. We need better support. And we need more of an understanding about all of these things because they're real, they're valid, and they are impacting us. There's a heavy cost with being in a constant state of stress, with constantly being subjected to traumas all the time and having people tell you that they aren't real, having people dismiss you and tell you that it's no big deal when your body took it in as a very big deal. And it adds up, and I wish we didn't have to go through it without support. So thank you for listening, and thank you for being a part of this community, even if there is not much support for us, at least we have this and each other, and that can help a lot. As always, remember, autistic adults exist. We deserve awareness, support, community, and acceptance, and I'm so grateful that you're here. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.